Hi, I'm Thumbstick, also known as the better looking half of the Co-opters. I'm going to do a video today on AFL Evolution, the new AFL game that was released earlier this year. I'm going to give my thoughts and a bit of a review on it. Now, for those of you that don't know, AFL Evolution is the new it's a simulation game of Australian rules football. And I mean, if you're not Australian, or if you just live under a rock and don't actually know what it is, imagine like a mix between American football, rugby, and soccer, and just kind of mash them all up together, put it in a blender, and that's pretty much what it is. It's a pretty hard game to learn. There's lots of strange rules, but it's very fast-paced, very physical, great to watch, and really, really fun to play. So this game had a lot of really high expectations leading up to release. I, for one, was extremely excited about it. I was actually sitting in the barber waiting to get my hair cut, and I was on Facebook just kind of, just reading as you do, trying to pass some time. And I saw that EB Games was running an early release on it. So I actually kind of just walked up, left, went straight down to EB Games, picked up two copies actually, one for me, one for my brother, and then we ended up spending all night playing it. So as you probably know, this isn't the first AFL game that's been released. There's actually been quite a few. The first one was back in 1991 on the NES, Aussie Rules Footy. I mean, I remember playing that when I was young. That was actually released before I was born, but I mean, I still kind of grew up playing a lot of that. And when you go back to that game was very basic. I mean, that was AFL stripped down in its most basic form. I mean, on the NES there's only two buttons. There's A, B, and there's a D-pad. A button to kick, a button to handball, same button to tackle. Goal kicking was really simple. There was no kind of, fending off. Like, a lot of the features of the game weren't in it, but it was really basic and it really flowed well on the console. And I think AFL Evolution is exactly that. It's an evolution. They're making it very realistic now, adding in a whole lot more features, and it's just become something that truly is absolutely incredible. But it doesn't quite flow on a console. I feel like the developers sort of had two options that they could have gone for. They could have gone for a really realistic game that may be lacking a good way to sort of have a flow, or they could have gone for a really dumbed down basic game that would have been really fun to play but not a good simulation. And they've clearly gone for the more realistic approach, and I'm just going to point out a few points of why that didn't really work for them. One of the first things you notice when you start playing the game is you notice how absolutely beautiful it is. It's easily the best looking game. I mean, obviously you expect that because it's the newest, but it's just incredible how almost realistic and how much they've gone into, particularly like the different players' faces and bodies and everything. It's absolutely gorgeous the way they've done that. I mean, like, look at Rory Sloane. Look at him, seriously, come on. Gorgeous. But once you actually start getting into actual gameplay, that's when you start to notice where some of the fundamental problems actually lie. You first start to notice these problems at stoppages. There's just way too much going on to keep track of. You find yourself just kind of like button mashing it just as soon you don't even know if you're getting the ball. You have to press the button to handball off before you even got the ball, because as soon as you take the time to realize, you've been tackled and there's going to be like another ball up, or it's holding the ball, or just something like that's going on. And like, I mean, if you put it on easy rather than normal or a harder difficulty, you do get that extra second. But if it's on easy, then you get that extra second, and you find it's just far too easy. Because I mean, it's basically just ball up, handball off, kick to the forward line, easy goal, and it just becomes very boring. But if you put it on a difficulty where the regular gameplay is going to be harder, you find stoppages you just don't seem to have any control of. So I don't think it's a skill issue here. Like, obviously I'm not the best player at it, but I don't think it's a skill issue. I think that's an issue with the game. Let's talk about the different game modes. There's three main career modes in this game. There's listed player, rookie player, and coach. Now, listed and rookie player are very similar to each other in terms that you only control one player on the field. That's really good because it kind of simplifies it down, that there's not so much going on. You controlling 18 players at once can be a bit hectic, a bit crazy to do. But this kind of simplifies it down, adds a bit of strategy into it as well, because you've only got a limited amount of stamina. So you have to control how much times you're going to be sprinting or tackling or kicking or marking. So you got to plan ahead. You got to kind of like, is it worth running to that contest or not? But that's actually where a big problem of this comes in, because once your stamina runs out, the coach will take you off the ground until at least the end of the quarter, so you won't come on until the next quarter or even the next half. And this is a problem because you're actually forced to sit there and watch it until the coach is going to put you back on. Because you could be sitting there watching for 4 or 5 minutes until you're going to be able to play again. And I mean, no one wants to just kind of sit there and watch for 5 minutes. I mean, you know, you buy the game to actually play the game. There is an option to simulate until the end of the match, but I found myself doing that when I was playing a full season. I would play the first half of the first quarter, I would run out of stamina, the coach would take me off, and instead of sitting there for 5 minutes watching the game, I would simulate to the end of the match and just start the next match because I wanted to play. So I found that the seasons just ended really quickly because I was only playing half of a quarter each match. This is definitely something they could have fixed. They could have had an option to simulate until when the coach is going to put you back on, you know, simulate until end of rest or something. But simulate to the end of the match, it's just too much. You don't want to sit there and watch it. So listed player is very similar to rookie player. Rookie player, you customize your own player, and there's huge customization. You choose the name, you can choose the club you want to go to, the position on the field, but physical customization is really in depth. There's so much you can add to it, different hairstyles, color, faces, tattoos. You can choose whether or not you want strapping on. I mean, I probably spent at least 45 minutes trying to design my rookie player. I'm not very decisive on things like that, but I still feel like there's a huge amount of it in there, which is great for people that are, you know, really into that. But by halfway through, I was just like, I just want to play a game of footy. But listed player, you can choose someone that's already on a list and start at their career and play through them. So this is really good if you're obsessed with players like, you know, Rory Sloane or something. The coach mode is the more classic way to play the game. That's when you control all 18 players on the field. It's a lot more chaotic to play this mode. It's much more hectic. You mostly notice this when you're trying to mark. Trying to mark a contested mark in this game is incredibly hard in that mode. I mean, the game will usually give you the best player in the best position to be able to take the mark in any contest, but it's not always the case, and it's really difficult when you have to try and cycle through the 4 or 5 players that are on the field and try and find the one that you think is the best player or the player in the best position to take the mark. And then you have to hold down Y and then release it and try and get it all done in time, and you find it very frustrating. But some really good points about this game mode is that there's no quiet time. When you're playing on a rookie player mode or a listed player, you want to put yourself in the middle or in the forward line, somewhere where you're kicking goals and being part of the action. With coach mode, you're controlling players from all over the ground, so there's always something for you to do. Stamina isn't a problem either, because all the players are going to get their rest while you're controlling other players in different contests, so that's not an issue in this mode at all. Another good point in the coach mode is you get so much more control out of match time. So you can control things like all the staff and the finances and the merchandise price and tribunals, injuries. It gives you a real control over what's happening in the club, and it really helps for an immersive experience. Another issue of the game in all game modes is the AI in front of goal. They have a real problem with kicking straight goals. Even if they got a mark 10 metres out, they still seem to be missing it 50% of the time. Some AFL players will miss it occasionally, but you don't see stuff like that happening 10 times a game. But of course, having said that, the goal kicking on the player's side is done really, really well. It's done very smoothly. It's done very similar to what they did in AFL Live 2. If you're close to goal, you press B, it sets you up for a set shot, gives you a different angle. You pull back on the thumbstick and then push it forward, and you have to get the timing just right. And I really like that because it's purely based on practice and skill. I really need to mention the commentary in this game. When I first heard it, it was the best part of the game. Me and my brother were sitting there and we were just laughing our heads off at all the funny shit that Dennis Cometti was saying. It just seemed to be line after line of absolute gold coming out of his mouth. I mean, he would say things like,
Crouch approaches tackles like some people approach chocolate. That decision was like taking a beer to a job interview. Not a very good idea.
Although the bad thing about this is, once you hear the key lines a few times, it loses its edge and it's really not as funny as it was the first time, and it just gets old. And as you'd expect in the commentary of these games, there's obviously a lot of disjointed audio from the commentary when they mention things like players' names or teams or cities or even score lines.
There's the siren for the end of the quarter. The scores at Richmond 9 to the Crows 2.
But stuff like that is expected in games like this. It's always been like that since they had the first game with commentary in it. And it's not even a bad thing. There's almost a bit of charm about it. I think I'd be a little bit disappointed if the commentary wasn't like that. But where the commentary really falls in this game is whenever Matthew Richardson says anything. Not only does he just sound bored and disinterested about anything that he says, everything that he says is completely irrelevant to anything that's happening in the game. You'll be mid-game and you'll just start talking about something about a player having pride in his Guernsey or anything, and it's not relevant at all. It could be after the player just stuffed up the kick or something. So it almost just draws it away, and it's just cringeworthy whenever I hear it.
Winning means you're willing to go longer, work harder, and give more than anyone else.
Something else that they added into AFL Evolution, which they didn't have in previous years, was the international teams and the women's teams after the success of the AFLW season, which is absolutely fantastic to see. I didn't even know that they were going to have the women's teams in the game until after I bought it and it was on the back. So it does say that it needed like a 3 gig download or something for that to happen, so maybe it was just a digital thing that they brought in before release that's not on the disc. But it was really great to see that. It is sort of just the same game with different bodies and names, but it is really good to see that they're just adding more teams into it, and I like that. Most people compare these AFL games with other big sports games like FIFA and NBA 2K, NHL, all those kind of games from EA Sports and whatnot. And I'm not entirely sure if it's fair because they do have a lot more money to be able to produce these games. But it's really sad because I feel AFL Evolution was really close, and I think Wicked Witch and True Blue were so close to being able to pull off a game which could compete against them. But it just lacks those little things which they're capable of fixing before release, but they just didn't. And I feel like that's why these games are never at the next level. And I understand there's not going to be as much money going into this because they're not going to be selling these games in most parts of the world. It's pretty much just going to be Australia. But I don't think it is about money though, because they were so close. They could have done it. So do I think AFL Evolution is a good game? Yes, it is a good game. It is not a great game though. If they fix these problems, I feel like it could have been next level, but it is lacking, unfortunately. If you are a fan of the series, you will enjoy playing it, you will have a good time. If you're with your mates and you're all playing together, it is a good night, but in terms of it being a quality game, it is lacking, unfortunately. So that's pretty much all I've got to say about it now. There are all the points I really wanted to cover. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Anything to comment? What do you like about it? What else do you think they should have changed, actually? Also, be sure to check out some of the other videos. D-Pad's, he's pretty funny sometimes, so, give him a shot, and we'll see you next time.